Make sure you can hear me. I don't hear you guys at all.
Okay, we're good. We're good now. We're good now?
Yeah, I hear it now. I hear it now.
All right, perfect.
So there'll be no nose picking, none of that stuff on the screen.
Yeah, we've got you on the big screen, so we got 3 angles.
Yeah, I love myself. Want me to let you in?
No, not that guy. We tried to kick him out. All right, so we're just gonna let people trickle in.
That's fine.
Get started here shortly.
Should I add Jim to the name so he's always large?
Yeah, that'd be great if you can pin him up there.
My phone was almost dead, my gas was almost out. This guy helps me park my car, he goes and gets me a charger for my phone, and says, you play to disappear. So he brought me up here, and there was like a,
You can't drive anywhere anyway.
Oh, come with us, we got a place for you. Yeah, so, it's like, no, it wasn't like that, no, she said that.
How are you saving this recording too? YouTube? YouTube?
Oh, yeah.
Everyone who's participated here back to the image.
Okay.
So I'll need to verify that you.
Okay. So, but if they're on the meeting, you can view it?
Yeah.
Okay.
As soon as the meeting's over, in the chat, it will pop up a meeting recap, and you'll be able to watch the video and do the transcript from there.
Gotcha. So it looks like, I'm not sure you can hear Jim, where it's, Teams will be saving it, so once the meeting ends, it'll pop up a transcript for everybody, and they can view it.
Okay. Just as long as I get a copy, make sure I get a copy.
Yeah.
Just so I can critique myself.
If you don't get a copy, just send me an email.
I will. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and you can always reach out to me too.
Okay.
Feel free, if you need to write down my contact info, I can send it to you after the fact. I have also an odd place to see what.
Snacks.
What would be good?
Turn it over.
Yeah. Oh, cool. All right.
If you got our printed roster out, so we're doing things, just check if you want
Oh.
DH.
Should be on there.
It's front and back too.
So, there I am. So you pen for a sec. Check for POU?
PDU,
POU. Just means you were here?
personal development unit, that's the,
Well, I'm here.
there you go.
All right. Ah. Ah.
Have a seat where you want.
Thank you so much.
I think that,
Yep.
yeah, I think so.
Just if you want a certificate for
Did you see
CECs,
this? I don't
PDUs.
know if you're interested, we're having a showcase. It's just
Okay.
code word for party.
Yeah.
So if you email me
26.
2 days before my birthday,
So this is your birthday party.
sort of,
Oh, one month.
sort of.
Oh,
Yeah, just, you can email me and I can send you that digital link, digitally, and you can just click on the link to register.
We should check it out.
I was just telling them, we're having another one of our showcases, and if you, if you email me, I can send this to you, and you can register from them. Anyway,
Did I miss the memo, Carlos? Didn't realize. We're blasting it up.
No, you know, I was trying something new.
Friday you can.
Yeah.
Maybe that is.
Good thing I didn't wear my shorts.
I'm Alex. Nice to meet you.
Hey there, Greg. Wonderful, how are you? Yeah, I didn't know if you were over here or not.
True.
On Friday.
So nice to see you. You know what I'm trying to. with this, like, gimbal.
Yeah.
Cool.
I had
It's
it
pretty
pictured
cool.
out and been to the new person that.
Because you know, I'm trying to capture. I can't get it to tilt right.
No,
But it's
Yeah,
kind
anyway,
of cool.
so-
You can hold it and just use it. Stabilizer and make it feel it like it's like
Yeah.
an extension. But it's also able to track.
And, I was telling them, we're having a manufacturer showcase at
Oh,
happy hour on the 26th. If you're interested in coming,
Well, yeah, well, you're away from all that.
email me and I can
Good
send
class.
you the link to register.
$400.
Next time. Hey, take one.
Pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
So here's what I'm good for them.
Yeah, it has a little. I think they were still selling DGR products.
Well, I mean,
We got,
the food truck.
yeah, the system that's good to go. Yeah, that's good.
Huh?
Cool. Cut this thing off. I was just playing around with it.
I think that, make a piece of fiber, that's a trickle line.
Sure.
From 285.
Yeah, there's probably some traffic
Yeah.
and congestion out there. Yeah, I was thinking about the time. I was like 5, but
And
it's
tell,
also Friday, so
tell, oh,
we can leave a little bit early.
you know, say, tell Josh.
Nice to meet you. I'm Will Trout.
Are you from Atlanta?
Yeah, kind of. I'm from East Tennessee, and I've lived here for a while. Moved down here, so yeah. What about you? I saw you walking in.
No, well, I like, I mean, I just,
nervous.
well, no, there's
I
a,
usually.
I just see things on LinkedIn, there's all kinds of stuff happening here.
Nice.
And I didn't know what was going on before.
Person.
You still got a presence down there?
I came to one back in November, I think. They were talking about batteries,
Yeah.
battery storage.
No, it's a lithium ion.
Yeah. It was. It was fun to listen to.
Started trying to implement that right away with these data center programs. Every time I was like, we should look at one.
Well,
Yes.
good.
What do you do?
I'm in work AWS.
Okay.
Oh, I mean, I'm sorry to hear that.
I'm like a design manager.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Co-location.
I'm sure that's still going on.
So,
That's been a few weeks.
The project from complete.
Okay.
Making sure like they during the startup, making the whole contract, make sure facilities all the right things.
I didn't know if you were coming to this part of the.
Do you have to do a lot of projects at one time, basically, and you're jumping around, you know?
So,
Must be in the front row.
It should be busy for the next year and a half. If it's a normal, it's complicated, it'll be longer than that. Yeah, that's no reason to
I
say.
gotcha. You have to travel to do that?
You know, my mom was doing it, that's pretty. Now, that's it. You know, look at it today, there's more people. But no, my mom made the same too. Just think, just look, more than 50
Yeah. It's MEP engineering, so I'm fairly new, but, yeah, I do science and technology and higher ed projects and stuff, so just electrical systems for buildings and figuring out how to support, so.
That's it. Cool, you sound good, so hopefully that's gonna be okay. Oh.
David, yeah. He,
Good,
he's the
Joanne.
person who, convinced
We
me
were
to
supposed to
join
leave for Florida.
IAS and start running these meetings and stuff, so he's a really cool guy.
When the book was no worries on when I landed, they said, nah, I think it's worth it done.
Sorry?
I had 10 days conversation about these and all those places. No, that's just.
Yeah, that was the cool thing to find out. He did my interview, and then after I started, I started talking to him, and he told me that he
We've
had a
had some
band.
really
It's
good
like-
weather.
I've met a lot of electrical engineers who.
10 days, two winters already. It's one year, you can't get the rehearsals. We were, like Manatee Spring, which is.
Well, I'm gonna,
Which
just look
is
at that, we got
really close to see.
Jim and everyone on the call, we're just gonna
So,
give people on 285, 5 minutes more to suffer.
yeah, a little small town, there's a nice small state park down there that they have a spring right there where the campground is, and then there's one north that they also.
This freaking gimbal.
Same park man.
And I don't know how to use it.
But man, it's not huge like Crystal River where there's people everywhere. Still get a good amount of Manatee, and it's nice, it's strong river there, and it's nice for paddling kayaks and stuff.
Yeah, I think so.
And we're gonna miss it, but not that it's totally green. No, man. I don't even know if I have enough LP on board with the 50-gallon tank. I might not have been able to heat 10 nights, you know? I'd be trying to find some place to refill my LP tank, you know? That's the wrong thing to do. I got a wetsuit, but I really don't want much paddling in it, you know, that's just not. Yeah, with this. Yeah, they sort of come up in and hang out there with the spring, so, yeah. Hmm? No, I don't know.
Yeah, fair enough. No, you're always, last time you're in
Better to worry about that.
dressed well too, not a suit, but I feel like I remember
I bet you did.
you're wearing, I can't remember what it was, like some athletic hoodie or something. Yeah, I mean, keep it interesting, right? Can't be saying what's saying. For me, it is, when it gets cold, I just throw in the CCI jacket or whatever. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, that's good.
It's kind of overall. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's always fun.
It's like,
And that's, yeah, both sides.
and then like, At 4 o'clock.
Hey, how's it going?
Technology here.
Yeah, but like.
Oh, this is that thing that it's like a you put like a camera on it. And like make it.
Oh, and then it holds it steady. Does your does Roman have one of those here?
He has a well, not like that, but he does have a small camera. He just got
Okay.
to make videos.
Oh, that's cool.
Clients, like, I don't.
But I'd like to. I think we could put it in between here or something. Just
Yeah. It's like the low scale. I've seen him do that in like movies and stuff. Usually as running after
the
something.
dollar.
Yeah.
Well, I booked one.
Yeah, I was up in Kennesaw. There's like nobody there.
Yeah. Do people go in on Fridays in Kennesaw?
There was the lady at the front and Jeff.
Okay.
Those are the only 3 people. Well, there was one other person, but I couldn't see them. But
Yeah.
there's like 4
Yeah,
people.
we haven't been in 3 years.
Any sourdough? But it's Sarah that's at the front, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was looking for like snacks and stuff. I'm like, oh crap, I gotta drive somewhere.
Does the microphone work?
Yeah, the microphone's on.
Yeah, it really, yeah, it is.
All right. Looks like we have a pretty full house already. Thank you all for joining us tonight for our January presentation. It's unconventional. I know that we usually present on Tuesdays or so, or Mondays during the week, but we tried an unconventional method this time. And thank you all for joining. So today's topic is covering 2026 NEC changes. For those of you who are familiar with the code, it gets a few reiterations periodically, pretty much every 3 years. And this year is 2026 iteration. We did have the pleasure of having Jim present to us in 2023 when the code also changed the last, and we are happy to welcome him back this year. So without further ado, I'll kick it off to Jim. Oh, one thing shortly too, I did want to mention that there is a happy hour going on after tonight's presentation. So if you are able to stick around with us, we're going to be transferring to the Speakeasy, which is another building just next door. So we'll just walk over with us and we'll have a good time. And let's get into it.
Do you want to mention how questions out of escort?
Oh, yes. As for questions, we want to make this interactive. So if you do have questions, just feel free to ask. We have microphones set up throughout the room. So just raise your hand. We'll pass a mic to you. If you are online, you can put your questions inside the chat. We would appreciate if you raise your hand, and that way it's sequenced. And so the questions get answered in order that the person raises their hands. And thanks for that too, Andrew. Am I missing anything else?
I think that's it. Mark, you have a question?
Yeah, one person.
Yep.
Actually, Jim's shirt answers my question. IEEI, that's an excellent organization. I'm also a member of that.
Me too, for a long time. Thank you for that.
Certainly.
Yes. All right, let's get to it. Thanks, and I'll turn it over to you, Jim.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Hey, welcome everyone, and thank you for having me back again. I'll give you a little brief synopsis of myself. I don't want to take a lot of time. I was an inspector for the city of Atlanta for 10 years. I've been an electrical contractor since about 1987. I've been in the electrical trade. I am currently, when I did this class for you last time, I was in Portland, Oregon, in 2022. I think we did it December of 2022. And now I'm the chief electrical inspector for the city of Raleigh, North Carolina. So I made it back to the East Coast, thank goodness. I don't want to take a lot of time about myself, but I teach classes all the time. On the first PowerPoint slide, I put a website address if you ever want to come. The classes are usually free. Most of the time they're ICC certified or through AECA, which is NECA, which is the Atlanta branch of NECA. And so you can always get continuing education credits there. If you want to get added to the mailing list, be happy to put my email address in there. I don't think I did it on the PowerPoint slide, but there's a phone number on there, or you can ask one of your board members. They have my email address also. And then I'll add you to it whenever I do the classes. You can just come. I'm not trying to promote myself, just every once in a while somebody needs some CEUs or something like that, and we're happy to do that. Okay, so as they said in the introduction, you know, every 3 years we get a new code. I'm about as new to this change as you guys are. Okay, so we're going to muddle through this together. Up on the screen, I want to share the screen, make sure everybody can see it. I can see it on the screen, so that's good. Up on the screen is the I'm not here to promote NFPA Link either. I'm just telling you it's a good tool. They have the 2026 codebook already on NFPA Link. There's a lot of changes. The other electronic codebooks that most people use is Upcodes. Upcodes is good. It does not have a 2026 version up yet, but Upcodes is good because it does incorporate the amendments in. So if you went and looked at this amendment right here in January 1 of 2026, I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but Georgia entered an amendment to the 2023 electrical code, okay? They put in there, and they put in some language about what they weren't going to cover and different books and things like that. So chapter 2 dwelling units and some of the other things that they amended was the countertop receptacles being allowed to be on the sides of cabinets if you're doing a lot of multifamily apartment complexes, things like that. But the document is there. So the amendment is there for the 2023 code. And it took effect January 1 of 2026. So Upcodes is good because it incorporates that stuff into it. And it also keeps you up to date on any amendments that come up. So that being said, I use both. I use NFPA Link personally. At work, they have a subscription or for all of us to use Upcodes. So either one is good. Upcodes is good. It has a lot of diagrams in it if you have the full version. This is not the full version. This is just a trial version. But again, like I said, it has all of the amendments in it. So if you click on the chapter and go to 210, you'll see that they amended. And if you had the full version, you'd see the amendments are in a different color. And it'll show them already built in to the language. Okay, so both good. The model code in Link is just a model code with no amendments, no state amendments. So I wanted to show you that just because. The other thing that they asked me yesterday, we did a little dry run yesterday on what we wanted to cover, is how the code gets adopted. And so anyone can go and create a free NFPA account, okay? All it's going to ask you for is an email address. No fee, just put an email address, create a free account. You would go to professionals, you would go to the list of codes and standards, and then you would come down to the current edition, which is the 2026. You can pull any edition you want all the way back to 1897. If you're a code geek,
It's like one page long.
it's pretty funny to read if you want to see it because you know, they don't call generators, they're called dynamos, and there's, believe it or not, the ampacity table in 310.16 is pretty much the same as it was in the original code. It changed a little bit in the 20s. Because back then, if you look at the cover, it was run by the underwriters, which is the insurance companies. And so they were having more fires, so they changed the ampacities in the 20s. But other than that, those ampacities have stayed the same for conductors all this time. The other thing that it does show is, and I won't go through, but you can click on, if you get down to like the first draft readings, the first draft reports, it's going to bring up a thing called TerraView. And TerraView is an interactive page that when you see things like what was lined out here, and what was put in, and then if you wanted to, again, if you want to know why the code changed or what provoked them or pushed them to change the code, you can see, the first revision and the first draft revision, who submitted it, where it came from, how the committee voted, and all of that stuff. So
You need to go
again,
fix.
if you want to know, if you want to know how the code gets adopted or what it goes through to get adopted, they've already started on the 2029 code. Okay. Once the 2026 was done, after it went through all the NITMAMs and all that other stuff that it goes through, they already started. The last process is the NITMAMs right here. Once they get into it, before the erratas and the TIA start, but right here, you have to go back to, I think it's down here. Sorry for that. Right. Technical meetings, the drafts, and then the first drafts, second drafts. Then everybody gathers together in Massachusetts, and they have this thing called NITMAMS, which is your last chance to get something put on the docket. Anyway, so that's kind of the process. Anyone, it used to be a lot more complicated, but anyone, if you do this free account, you can go in and submit for a change. If you feel something should be changed, you're going to have to document it, show why you want to change, what the reason is, and put all kinds of documentation. But, it is good to know that you are part of the process. Okay. And it's people like us that they want to interact and do these things, because we're the people that use the book. Again, not trying to waste a lot of time, but just so you know what's coming as a precursor, even though we're just starting in 2026, at the very end of the 2026 code, there is a proposed layout of what the 2029 code will look like. So any of us who have been doing this for a long time that can rattle those 210.8s, A, and 310.16 and 110.3B, and all that stuff we can rattle off our heads, we could throw that all out the window, because in 2029, there'll be 22 chapters now instead of the 9 that we're used to. Okay. And it's going to have a whole, it's really being set up to be more and more like the other NFPA books. And so, all this stuff is going to change. Chapter 6, and it goes all the way, we looked at it again last night, all the way up to chapter 22. The tables will be in chapter 30, and then the informative annexes will be at the end, like they are now. So if you're close to retirement, consider it. I mean, for me, for a guy who teaches this stuff year after year and knowing them code sections off the top of my head, it's going to be really tough for me to learn all of this. All this, chapter 17 and over 1,000 volts and all, everything just completely changes. 422 is now, all that 422 stuff is all chapter 16 now, and so on and so forth. So I'm not looking forward to it, but I did want to make you aware of the fact that this has been building up for years. If you remember, in the 2014, they moved a few of the hazardous location stuff into like part 3 of the definitions. And then they moved a few more definitions in 2020. In the 2023 code, they moved all the definitions into Article 100. Okay, and there is no more .2s for definitions. Now, the .2s still exist, but they're just placeholders, and they stick other things in there. And if you go to a lot of conferences, and you hear a lot about why, when we talk about some of the changes, why this got put there or how it got put there, and it really had no rhyme or reason. It's just that there was a place to put it. So there was a section that didn't have anything in it that was previously deleted. So they said, well, here's a placeholder, let's just stick it here. And that's kind of how the book got all misconstrued. And they just finally just said, we need to reorganize this book. And it's been building over the last couple of cycles until we finally get to 2029 where it completely goes the other way on us. So, and there's nothing to click on here, or I'd show you more. But I believe that you're going to see more and more like, there's a link there for NEC reorg if anybody's interested in it. NFPA.org/NEC reorg might tell you what they're going to do, but I'm assuming it's going to be more like, it's going to look more like this book where it's, 4.1.2, 0.3 kind of stuff. It's going to look more and more like that. So that's the life safety code right there, NFPA 101. Gone are the days of the 9 chapters after this code cycle. So anybody who, like I said, anybody who's close to retirement, consider it.
He's gonna be pissed. We still got 3 years.
Anyway, okay, so anybody have any questions about the code books, electronic code books, NFPA, ParaView, all good?
Has AI adopted to this website?
Has IAEI?
You can rephrase the question if you're close to the mic.
Yeah. Has AI adopted to any of this at the moment?
Yes, right here. So AI now, they NFPA Link put this thing called Cassie in here, and we did run it a piece last night, and it kind of saves them here. I guess you can clear them out. So I put in 2 questions, and this is what they came up with through the AI stuff. And then it gives you different links, and again, if they're highlighted, you can click on them, and it brings you to the code section. And then last night, I think it was Alex was asking about microgrids, and we did a microgrid search just to see, and the definition changed, and again, if you click on the little 1, it'll bring you to the code section, which the definition of a microgrid is an electric power system containing interconnected power production sources capable of acting as a primary source independent of any electric utility. So yes, they have incorporated, which this is the first year that we've had this AI stuff in here. We've always had search, and we've always had bookmarks, and what you bookmark in 1 year carries over to the next year. So I bookmarked this, 250.118B, which is not permitted to use a grounding electrode. Then there's an exception for on the secondary side of transformers, which is almost impossible to make it code compliant. But a lot of people, when I got to the West Coast, were using equipment grounds because the grounding I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but when you set a separately derived system, a transformer, okay, and say it's on the ground floor of a building, you don't get to just drive a ground rod next to the transformer and say, hey, that's my grounding electrode, okay? It has to be the grounding electrode system of the building. That's in the code, okay? So sometimes no one takes that into account, and they have a suite over here. The MDP with the grounding electrode system is across, and it's a hard ceiling, and there's no way to get to it. So when I got to the West Coast, a lot of people were using the equipment ground in the raceway as a grounding electrode conductor, but they weren't doing it correctly. So I went to Chuck Mello, who actually upkeeps the SOARS grounding and bonding book for IAEI for years until recently. I think this is the first edition he's not been a part of, and asked him how we can make that code compliant. And it is so difficult to do that it almost fails every time. So if someone says, can we do that? You should just tell them no, because It's very hard to be compliant. But it's always had this feature. It's always had bookmarks. It's always had other things. You know, with, again, I'm not here to promote link, but it's great to have an electronic code book. If I wanted to send you a section and I opened up something and I wanted to email it to you, I just click on the three dots, I say share, I send you an email, and you just click on it and say, hey, somebody sent you a link from this book, and it will bring up the text. So no, it's a good tool. All right. Again, any more questions about electronic codes? Say it again.
Jim, it looks like we have a question from Tammy.
Okay.
I have a question. I'd like to know your opinion of the reorganization, if you think it's a good thing or it's just going to create a lot of havoc.
I think, like anything else, all of us hate change. Okay, change is painful, and those of us have been doing it for so long who can just rattle those things off the top of our head are really going to hate it. I think the correlation committee and I forget the term that they use for the other group, probably said, hey, we got to get in line with these other books. Okay. It's like everything else, Tammy. If you go in and look, let me pick, well, let's pick like 695, which is fire pumps. Okay, that's a good one to pick. If I picked fire pumps and I went into any of the fire pump sections, you know, you're going to see after certain sections, there's this little link right here, right? And I can't click on this link to get anywhere, but what that is it's NFPA 20, which is the fire pump book. Okay, so I think this is the only book that wasn't organized this way. And yes, it's going to be painful. Am I going to like it? I don't know yet. I might. It may be easier to navigate. I didn't think I'd like all of the definitions being in Article 100. There's 837 definitions, but paper code books are going away. I mean, we'll always have them until the testing agencies allow us to go electronic, which I don't know if they ever will, unless they download them on some tablet and hand it to you. That's all it's on there, you know. But of course, it's a lot easier now. If I go into NFPA link, if I want to search for something in Article 100, I just hit the search, you know, and put it in there, and that's where all this is going. So it may be easier to navigate once they rearrange it. It's pretty cluttered up. And like I said, when we talk about some of the stuff, you know, some of the changes that have occurred, and I'll try to explain if I remember, you know, clearly why it was there, but we'll talk about it as we go. But I don't know. Maybe I'll be happy with it. Maybe I'll hate it, and it'll force me into retirement because I'll be 65 in May. So by the time the 2029 comes out, I'll be real close. Anyway, but yeah, if you have any questions like that as we go, I may not have the answer. If I don't, I'll get you the answer and I'll get back to somebody. But please don't just sit there and, you know, and hate to like, oh, I should ask that question. There are no dumb questions, and everybody's welcome to ask one. As I said, we learned here together. I'm not here to teach you. You're here to teach me as much as I'm here to teach you. Anyway, okay, so we're going to use this PowerPoint. It's by a guy named Ryan Jackson. I don't know if anybody's familiar with him. He was an inspector out in Utah. He actually has an education program that he runs himself now. I see Ryan all the time at the conferences. He's a very knowledgeable guy. I like his PowerPoints very much. This is my name. If anybody wants to take a picture of the slide, it's not copyrighted. And that's my phone number. This is my website. You can get to me that way. And of course, this is just the title of what's going on here. If you need my email address, I'll be happy to provide it. It doesn't bother me, but like I said, your board members have it if you need it, or call me and I'll give it to you, and you can email me. There's actually a way you can talk through this website as well. So, all right, that being said, the disclaimer here, like everybody else. These are his opinions only, okay? Which all code is subject to interpretation. I may see it this way. You may say it's light blue. I may say it's dark blue. You know, that's just the way we see things because we're human. And so, you know, he's just out there like everybody else saying, hey, these are my opinions. This is the way I see it. This is what I think. So we run with that. This is a very long PowerPoint. It's like 1,400 slides. So I went in and I went in and I pulled out what I thought was important. We'll never get through even what I thought was important in a 2-hour time period, but at least it'll set the tone for what you're up against. Okay. What you see in the slides underlined in yellow is a code change. Okay. You'll see yellow text and it'll be underlined. The 2029, we already looked at that and told you that it will be completely restructured. There's a look at it in the annex of 2026 in case you're interested. Let me turn on the light because it's getting dark here. And I want to show you and talk a little bit about. So this is a 2026 code book. Yes, they still make paper copies. I wanted to stress also, if you have one of these, and I don't know why it's because of the background, and it has this little flame on it in the corner here, it is not a first edition, okay? First edition code books do not have the little flame in the corner here, okay? The other thing is on the inside, the very first page or so, you'll find some information about the shading and the different things. And then on the inside page, the revisions and what the little letters mean here. Okay. It'll talk about down at the bottom, the first printing adds TIA and blah, 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 and TIA, blah, blah, blah. And then there's some erratas and some other things in the first edition. This is not. Also be aware of the fact that when a state adopts a code, they adopt the first edition. Okay, whatever is included in the first edition is what's been adopted by the state. Amendments that come after the fact or erratas or TIAs are not code for that particular state. Okay, so be aware of that. You may be enforcing something, or I may be enforcing something. You may be designing to something that it really doesn't have to be that way because it's not a code yet. Or the state has to go back and say, yes, we're going to adopt that TIA. A perfect example of that was in the 2023 code, you know, the TIA that came out about pool grids and the perimeter surfaces of pools was something that came out way after the code book was written. Some states, when they were reviewing it, adopted it in, some did not. So be aware of that. Also, if you did want to get some sort of this is an IAEI analysis of code changes. Their books are usually very good. I have no problem with them. They're designed well. They're written well. This one was actually the first time that IAEI used inspectors to actually help write the code. A guy named Dave Williams from Virginia and a few other people actually sat down and wrote this. There's credit to them in the book. If you go to IAEI, I think it's around $65 or $55, something like that. You won't find any code language in any PowerPoints or any analysis books anymore. NFPA came back and said, hey, this is proprietary and we're not going to let you print it anymore because they're losing a lot of money and people were taking advantage of it. They have a little bit of a problem and a little heartburn with IAEI at the moment because IAEI went ahead and kind of ponied up with ICC, and that made NFPA very angry. So they do cater to Mike Holt a little bit more. So Mike Holt also has a 2026 analysis of code changes. Mike Holt always puts out good stuff. It's not always true to some of the things that he says are not exactly correct. I'm not down in Mike. I've known Mike for a long time. Anyway, so there's lots of materials out there, but you should familiarize yourself. You should want to know why the code changed, if it was something that you deal with quite heavily, and where all this is going. As far as code-wide changes go, there was a lot of effort put into isolate the requirements for 3 broad categories of, and I don't like to read PowerPoint slides verbatim, so I'm going to paraphrase a lot of this. But you're going to see a limited energy system equipment definition in Article 100. There's a lot of 1,000 volt AC, 1,500 volt DC, or what we consider medium voltage. And then, of course, everything in between, the 120, 240, excuse me, and also 277, 480 systems. So some of the articles that were relocated, all of you, I'm sure, especially engineers, are used to using Article 220 for size and a service, right? Whether you use the optional, the standard method, how many amps per linear foot for show window lighting or multi-outlet assemblies or whatever the case may be. And it's always been 220, right? 220 dot this, 220 dot that, 220.12 gives you the demand, you know, how many volt amps per square foot for an assembly. 220, 42, or whatever it is, the tables. I take the first 10,000, but there is no 220 anymore, okay? It is now 120, okay? 120, and the reason they moved it, because it never should have been in Chapter 2 to begin with. The title of Chapter 2 alone would tell you that it didn't belong there. Again, it's one of those things like, hey, we had an article here in 220, we don't use it anymore, let's just dump this in there. And it's been there for years, and so they moved it to 120. Energy management systems was back in Chapter 7, okay, it moved to 130. Non-power limited remote control signaling is now 206. There's a new article, was nearly identical to 625, but it is now 624 for electric self-propelled vehicle power transfer systems. Okay, and then 772 was relocated from 728, which is the 2-hour fire resistive cable systems, which is very interesting. The reason why 2-hour fire resistive cable systems has become very popular is one of the major code changes that comes about in Article 230 is, for how many years have we been considering 2 inches of concrete, you know, to make it 2-hour rated, right? Or outside the building or all that other stuff. That actually changes because they came to find out that the 2 hours just wasn't holding up. It was only standing up to about 45 minutes. And so after they did some heavy testing on the systems, it now has to be encased in 5 inches of concrete. So that's going to make 2-hour resistive cable very popular. It's also very expensive. The other thing about 2-hour resistive fire resistive cable is it must be installed as an assembly. That is in the UL listing, which means this cable, be it MC type cable or single conductors in a raceway, you must use these fittings. You must use these straps. It must be supported this way. It has to be run this way. Okay, if you do not run it that way or install it that way, so when you're designing, you better make sure that you specify that it needs to be installed per the manufacturer's listing and UL, whatever it is, I forget, 1276 or something like 2796, something like that. Okay, it better be installed this way, okay, because that's going to be the liability. So be aware of the fact that some of that changes is really going to be hot and heavy because of the 5-hour encasement. So some of the new articles, 265 for branch circuits over 1,000 volts, 1,500 volts DC, all of this branch circuits, feeders, outside branch circuit services, grounding and bonding, and then of course 235 was deleted and replaced with 265 through 270, and 399 was deleted and replaced by 265 through 270. The limited energy systems that came out. I mean, we're putting in more limited energy, low voltage, than we are high voltage anymore, or just as much. It's becoming a bigger and bigger industry every time you turn around. So these are the new articles that you see, and what was deleted and why it was deleted. Overcurrent protected devices. In 2023, in the code, we came out with an SPGFCI, which was a special purpose GFCI. It was for protecting systems 480 volts or larger or higher, okay? So some of the pumps and some of the things that are required to have SPGFCI, or some of the three-phase stuff that's required, like you have to have special purpose ground fault protection on it, SPGFCI. Some other language was added throughout the code for DC and AC only, or both. And then some of the long sentences and paragraphs were broken into lists and subsections. Again, that's that whole reorganization. If you ever go in and, or if you use a lot of NFPA books and you look at them, you'll see that. That's not my son calling me. He doesn't know I'm teaching. You'll see that most of the stuff in the other NFPA books are very short sentences. They're like, that's why we have all that 4.1.3 stuff, because they're very small. They're not these long paragraphs. So just be aware of the fact that things are going to get a little bit shorter, and it may look a lot different, okay? Again, sections .2 and .3, 300.2, 430.3 are now reserved for listing requirements and reconditioned equipment, respectively. And then the titles of chapters 5, 6, and 7 were changed. So we have new titles. Excuse me for that. So anybody have any questions about that? The code-wide changes, any of the restructuring, or, I mean, we'll get into it a little bit. If you want to look at the code, we can. Some of the reason I use Ryan Jackson's PowerPoint is he has really good pictures. They're not drawings, they're not cartoonish, they're very real. And he spends a lot of time taking a lot of photos, and he probably has a lot of people sending him photos of a lot of different things. So it's good to see. Okay. So all this winter weather here got me a little verklempt. Article 90. Article 90 for us is the administrative portion of the code, okay? It's very short. There's probably only a few changes. 90.2 gives us the scope and the language. So special permission was omitted. The authority having jurisdiction, the AHJ is the authority having jurisdiction, may exempt an installation that is not under utility control if it is outdoors or terminates inside the nearest point of entry of the service conductors. Again, the little thing here, customer-owned substations are not exempt, but are often waived using special permission. Although 90.2F was deleted, the allowances still exist in 90.4C. So the authority having jurisdiction can exempt certain things. The code arrangement has been changing quite a bit over the last couple cycles. The big change this time is Chapter 8 is no longer independent. I don't know if you noticed or not, but Chapter 8 was never part of the NEC. It was an independent book. All that communication stuff was independent. And the only time you had to do anything that was listed as far as grounding and bonding or supporting or anything like that was if it was specifically called out in Chapter 8. if you go back and read it, it says, it used to say chapters 1 through 4, general wiring and conditions, and then 5, 6, and 7 were, you know, special equipment, special occupancies, and emergency systems, or whatever that was. And then chapter 8 all stood by itself. And it used to say that chapters 1 through 7 are this, or chapters 1 through 7 can modify anything in 1 through 4, and so on and so forth. But it never included chapter 8. Chapter 8 always said you only had to do this if it was called out specifically in chapter 8. Well, that's all changed because now chapter 8 is part of the code. Okay, so chapter 1 is general, 2 is wire and protection, wire methods, materials, equipment for general use. 1 through 4 applies to all equipment, materials, and everything else. And then it says 1 through 4, unless modified in chapters 5, it used to say 5 through 7. Now it says 5 through 8. Chapter 5, of course, the change in the name is specific and occupancy and locations. Chapter 6, specific equipment, and then, of course, specific conditions and systems. Chapter 8, which is communications, now it says chapters 5 through 8 supplement or modify other rules in chapters 1 through 8. So if one thing is called out in chapter, like if it says you don't have to GFCI protect a sump pump if it's hardwired, but then you go back to chapter 620, in Article 620 for elevators, it says all the sump pumps, you know, it says all sump pumps shall be GFCI protected in 210.8 and in 422. Then you go to chapter 6 to 620, and it says you shall not GFCI protect this if it's hardwired because they don't want the pumps to stop running. And so that's how that works, is this can modify what it says here. Okay, so this chapter says you don't do this, but then you go to this chapter and it says, hey, you have to do this, so it overrides. So 5, 6, 7, and 8 override anything that's in 1 through 4. A mouthful. Chapters 5 through 8 apply to specific occupancies and locations, specific equipment, and systems and communications. They supplement or modify the requirements in chapter 8. Also, chapters 5 through 8 apply to specific occupancies, specific equipment, and communication systems. They supplement or modify the requirements of chapters 1 through 8. And so on and so forth. You get the gist of this, okay?
On their drawings, but I don't know where I thought they came from code. But I guess they own the code section.
So they're gonna ask us to, design the room for them?
Yes.
With the clearances?
No, they should just be aware of it now, right?
Yeah, and I'm sure it's the clearances they've been using, it's just now it's actually enforced.
Just bear with this for a second. We may have lost Jim. We'll dedicate a stretch break until we get him back.
I need to get some water.
Yeah, I'll grab some.
Oh.
The thing just went, just cut out.
Yeah, thanks for joining us again.
I don't know what happened. It just all of a sudden just said, we're trying to get you back reconnected.
Yeah, no.
I didn't lose my internet. I don't know what went wrong. Teams. All right. That's right. Everybody go to the bathroom, get a drink, get some chips. It's all good. I don't have any sound from your end anymore. There you go.
Can you hear us?
Yes, I hear you now. Did you need to start that recording or did it stop?
I
think we're still recording on our end.
Okay, all right, then I'll continue.
Okay.
All right. So in 90.5, the mandatory rules, permissive rules, and explanatory material. So basically, the date of any reference standard must once again be included in the informational note or text that references it. Annexes E, types of construction, and J, accessible designs, were deleted, and a new Annex L proposed 2029 NEC format was created. So I think they took the ADA stuff out of the annexes in the 2026. I haven't got back that far to actually look, but I believe that's what I was told. So maybe they're going to bring them back in. Informational notes are not enforceable, okay? So if it's an informational note, it is exactly what it says. It's for information purposes only. Voltage drop, although it may be important to the equipment, and when you guys design, I say guys as a general term, men and women, when you folks design stuff, you always incorporate, because the energy code calls for it, to be voltage drop to be considered. It's not something as an inspector that I can turn you down for, unless it's in the drawings specifically, okay? Because I'm there to enforce the approved set of drawings as well. But voltage drop is not a code. It is an informational note that is put in there for the manufacturers to say, if you do this, then you know, our stuff will work better or things will run better. But it's not code. It never has been. I mean, I could hang you another way if I wanted to as an inspector, but it's not under the voltage drop. I can't write you up for, you know, 210.19a informational note, because I would go, my boss would have a fit. Okay. 70E, which is the electrical safety in the workplace code book. You know, it's an informational note or an Annex A. You always, if it's referenced in the standard, it is going to be the current version unless it references a specific version. Okay. All annexes are informational. Okay. So you know that that little engineer's design for duct banks that used to be in 310, or, you know, they had those little pictures in there for the longest time. That was never code either. Okay. And if you look now, it's back in Annex B. And then there's that whole calculation that's in there for designing the duct banks, and how things in the middle, which retain more heat, have less ampacity into things on the outside and all that other stuff. That's never been code either. That's all informational purposes. 90.7 is the examination for safety of equipment. We want to make sure that, and right now the market is flooded with counterfeit stuff and overseas stuff. It is just terrible. You know, we run across more and more stuff every day that is, you know, we have to tell them, hey, you got to go get the field evaluation done on this because it doesn't have a listing on it. You know, we just had a guy screaming about a wire stripping machine that he bought for, you know, $10,000, and it cost him $15,000 to have it certified. If he'd just bought one in America for $25,000, it would have been all good. But anyway, and it failed, I think, the first 3 times that they went out there. So, and there's a lot of counterfeit marks out there. Also, 90.7, make sure that the equipment listed and tested that complies with 110.3C, that the factory installed wiring and the construction of the equipment do not need to be inspected except to check for alterations or damage. We do have some inspectors over time that go out there and start, you know, I don't think that ground strap is big enough. I'm like, you don't get to make that decision, okay? That you don't have any jurisdiction inside that cabinet, okay? Other than Wherever the 3 wires, if it's 3-phase, come in and land on those terminals, that's the extent of the jurisdiction we have as a municipality. Now, if I go in there and I see, you know, some metal shavings on the bottom of the cabinet and stuff, and I see a new hole, yeah, I can say, hey, this was modified. I want it tested. Okay, so that you can prove to me that it still meets the standard. And then, of course, note 1 for definitions for listed and reconditioned. Obviously, you're not going to recondition a strap, but we want to make sure that the straps are listed. The reason they put this in here is the listing does not have to be on each piece. Okay, if it's listed on the packaging, then it's all good to go. Also, again, we are allowed to look for modifications or damage. That is the extent. So, you know, we get a lot of pushback from engineers about, you know, certain products that they're using and how they're being used. So we want to make sure that it's being used the way it was designed to be used. The panel board does not require a listing. The molded case circuit breaker.
Is this microphone on?
I hear it.
Oh, I'm sorry. What courses of action do you take to course correct or have the facility course correct some of the documents or mishaps you've seen?
You mean as far as like the design itself?
Correct.
So hopefully most of that gets caught in plan review, which is why we have plan review. So we can avoid all those things on the tail end and get out there and say, well, you can't do this. But it does happen occasionally because the plan reviewers are human like the rest of us. So something gets designed, plan review misses it, it gets to the field, they build it that way, and then we say, hey, you can't do that. You know, and then we go back. Here in North Carolina, there's something called an Appendix G, which allows an engineer to take responsibility for part of the system. They can say, well, you know, I went out there and I looked at it and I think it's okay and it's being used under the intent it was designed to be used. And then the onus all falls back on you. A lot of times, you know, when we see something, we'll say, I need an engineer to either revise the drawings or give me a letter stamped saying that he designed this or this is acceptable. You know, then I have to take it to the building official and he has to look at it and approve it or ask for an alternate method. Tammy?
Is there some kind of basic philosophy on what determines what products have to be listed and which do not?
I think if you look in the electrical code itself, it says it basically says everything in that book that book talks about installing shall be listed. Okay. Not all of it is labeled. So everything has to fall under a standard. But again, it doesn't have to be labeled. A perfect example is EMT. Okay. EMT has to be listed, but the label doesn't have to be on each stick of EMT. And that's a really sore subject because when I did the Falcon Stadium in Atlanta, you know, I was the quality control, quality assurance manager for that building when it was built from the dirt up. The engineers came back and said, well, we don't want to see any of the labels from the EMT. Well, it's an open floor plan building. I mean, you're going to see the conduit. And every, you know, stick of conduit has a label on it. It's not only the listing, but it's also the SKU number and the barcode and everything else, because they do sell it a stick at a time in some places. And so they wanted us to go back and peel off all the labels. I said, I ain't doing that. And so the argument was that it had to be listed in labels, but actually EMT only has to be listed, not labeled. So I don't know if there is a philosophy behind it, but everything that's installed per the NEC shall be listed, not necessarily labels. And then they do have that exception that says, you know, you can put it on the packaging. And now it's got to the point where most of the equipment has barcodes on it. I mean, or a QR code. So you go up with your phone. My inspectors can go up to a circuit breaker now, hold it up to the QR code, and it pulls up everything from Siemens or Eaton or Square D, or not to leave anybody out, GE, whoever, and it brings up the whole spec sheet of the breaker. So kudos to the QR codes. Yes, Tammy?
I'm sorry to be stupid. I don't design building systems. But like on this slide, panel boards don't have to be listed, and I know a lot of other things don't have to be listed. And it confuses me on what does and what doesn't have to be listed.
Well, I think because it's an internal part, because again, as electricians, we always, if I told you you're my apprentice, I say, go get the panel board, you're going to run out to the truck, you're going to grab that whole thing, right, with the cover, and you're going to bring it to me. The panel board, by definition, is only the bussing. So the bussing itself doesn't have to have a listing, because I don't know why it doesn't have to. Maybe because it's built to a standard all the time. I don't know the answer. But again, the enclosure itself is nothing more than just a metal cabinet, and it probably has to be built to a standard. But I'm not sure exactly. And usually a minimum of 10,000 AIC or available fault current, AFCI, available fault current. No, interrupting current, AIC, 10,000, because that's what the breakers are. Okay, so every panel board, and again, if you looked at that, you'd look at that and say that's a load center. There's no such thing in the code book as a load center. Okay, that's just a term that we use at the big box store to say I'm buying a load center, which means it's not a bolt-in panel board. It's basically a plug-in P-style breaker that you put in a residence, which is pretty much all 10,000 AIC, because the available fault currents in most residences are never higher than 10,000 AIC. So whether it's built to a standard that they keep at the factory and they don't have to stamp it as being listed, I don't know, to be honest. Or if it's a component that they build that goes inside the enclosure, I don't know. But the breaker can be used in any panel board, whether it's listed or not. So maybe it's because it's a separate component and it's sold separately, it's installed separately. That's why it's got a separate listing on it. But, the heartburn over how did it make it out of plan review, back to the original question, how did it make it out of plan review? Well, those guys are human too. We have 3 plan reviewers that do electric commercial, okay? Because you don't review trades in residential, only structural. So in commercial, we have 3 commercial electrical plan reviewers. Those guys are human too. They look at a lot of drawings every day, and it's not like the old days where you got a paper set. Everything's electronic. I know you have heartburn about that. Whatever system they're using to review plans, we happen to use Bluebeam. Other jurisdictions use other things. In Portland, we use something else. I forget what it was even called. And Project Docs, I think it was. And there's all these other plans, that people use to review. And it's a lot to look at. I mean, I do plan review currently as a 3rd job for the city of Kennesaw, Georgia, because they don't have a full-time electric plan reviewer. And when they get into a complex project, they don't have anybody qualified to do it. So I do it from here. So I don't mind doing plan review. It's actually a good thing, keeps your head in a code book a lot. So, but things get missed a lot. It comes up, one of the biggest mistakes made on drawings is 112 kVA transformers, okay? The secondary conductors, because they're 400 amps into a disconnect or some sort of panel board, they'll always run 500s. And the plan reviewers will miss it and the designers will miss it. You cannot put conductors that have a 380 amp capacity on the secondary side of a transformer and terminate it into a 400 amp overcurrent. The laws in 240.21c, it specifically says the rule or the next size up rule of 240.4b does not apply and cannot be used. So they have to be 100% or fully rated conductors, which means you have to have 600s. Good luck finding a panel board that accepts 600 kc mil. So most of the time you're going to run parallel 3/0. So that's one of the most common misses and you get out there and the guy built it just like the drawings and we turn them down and they say, well, the drawings say, and well, the drawings are wrong. Well, how to get out of plan review? They missed it. So it happens. Anyway, long answer to a short question, but it does happen and everyone's human. Chapter 1, anybody good? Article 90? All good? There's a lot of definition changes. I'm not going to go through. I picked out some I thought were important. There's still a lot, so I'm going to go over them very quickly. But I'll give you my opinion on definitions. Because I'm from New Jersey, and that's what we do. We give our opinion about everything. If you don't understand the definitions, how in the world can you design it, install it, or enforce it if you don't know what it means? Okay? So to me, you have to understand the definitions first before you can ever do anything else. If you don't know what a receptacle is versus an outlet, that's a problem because the code says that all outlets in these rooms shall be arc fault protected. An outlet is any point on the wiring system where electricity is used for utilization equipment, and then there's a definition for what utilization equipment is. Okay? So you have to understand the definition. If it says you shall have, one outlet per kitchen island, which is not in the code anymore, but that means I can't take three. If I needed three, I can't take three receptacles, gang them together in one box and put them in that island because that's one outlet. That's one point on the wiring system where it's used. So it's one outlet. It's three receptacles. And if they're duplexes, it's 6 receptacles. So definitions are important, in my opinion, otherwise you can't do this job. We can't do it as inspectors, you can't do it as designers, and they can't do it as installers. Okay, so they have to understand the definitions before they can enforce the code or use the code. This has always been a bond jumper, okay? Between the two ground rods at any building, whether it's a single family residence or a 1200 amp service, okay? But I have seen inspectors say, well, hey, that grounding electrode conductor has to be continuous with no splices. It only has to be continuous to the first rod. From the rod to the next rod, it's a bond jumper. It doesn't have to be. You can't put them under the same acorn clamp because that's designed for one conductor. But if you went and passed through one acorn clamp and went to the other one to make it continuous, which a lot of people do, it's okay, but you don't have to make it continuous. The grounding electrode conductor that's not allowed to be spliced is from the disconnect or wherever it terminates at the grounded conductor in the service to the first rod or first grounding electrode. Okay? That's nothing more than a bond jumper. A new definition was added for cable limited energy cable systems. A factory assembly of one or more. It's a horrible looking picture right there. I mean, whoever installed that should be ashamed. A factory assembly of one or more optical fiber or conductors used for any of these. Class 2, Class 3, Class 4 circuits, optical fiber systems, communications, CAT, TV, network powered broadband, low power communications, premise communication circuits, or power limited fire alarm. So a limited energy definition now in the code. Cable limited use cable, also a new informative thing on the wiring. You're going to see that these cables use the suffix X like CMX or CL3X. a cable that requires protection like a raceway or is used for specific restricted applications. So if you see this limited use cable, it's either got to be installed in a raceway or it has to be installed a certain place or certain way, in a certain way. Believe it or not, cable ties has a definition now, okay? A definition for a cable tie: a length of material or a band that has a locking device and is used for securing, supporting, or bundling cables or flexible conduit or tubing. Okay, and then there's also another thing called, and of course, they're listed, cable ties in most states, not in this one, not in Oregon, but in Atlanta and Georgia, yes, you must use a cable tie that is listed to support, okay? The reason they put that in the code was because a lot of people were going down to the flea market buying a 55-gallon drum of cable ties that couldn't support anything, you know, and they would just put them up in the ceiling and they had no tensile strength whatsoever. They also have to be listed for the type of plenum they're in, or if it's a fire rated, or if it's a plenum ceiling, plenum rated, fire rated, whatever they are. There's also a thing called a cable tie fixing device. Now, these things have been around forever, so I don't know who convinced the code to put these in and call it a cable tie fixing device. But kudos to them, because I'm sure Amazon's been selling these things forever. But you can use this now. It's actually a component. I left this in because more and more pot smokers are in the United States and more states are legalizing it. So cannabis oil related terms, 5 new definitions are added to support the article. A cannabis oil booth, cannabis oil extraction, equipment, cannabis oil post-processing equipment, oil preparatory equipment, and cannabis oil systems. Now, on the West Coast, we did this stuff all the time. Buildings used to blow up all the time because they used butane to extract the cannabis oil. Listen, we've been extracting oil out of plants forever, but it was in cannabis. But lavender oil and other things have been extracted out of plants for a long time. This is just the big new boy on the block here. And there's a lot of rules around cannabis, what it has to be, but it's pretty dangerous stuff, and it is a hazardous location, and the equipment has to be listed specifically for that use. There's the definitions. I won't go through all of them and read them to you, but there are 5 new definitions under Article 100 for cannabis. I left this in because I thought it was interesting, because we'll all be out of jobs soon. A Class 4 circuit was kind of introduced in the 23 code when we talked about it. They just defined it a little bit more, put in some new stuff, but basically the wiring between a Class 4 power source and the equipment connects to is a Class 4 circuit. You know, you have this digital, you know, server, and you have a receiver, and the power gets transmitted over these. It's DC and gets converted back to AC, and volt server is the people that are doing this. And I'm sure they didn't put all of this in there to not have it become available soon. There's an informational note that a Class 4 circuit is safe as it relates to both fire and electric shock, despite its relatively high voltage and current, because of the active monitoring and control of the circuit. Basically, it can't short and it can't shock because of the way it's monitored. So it's a very safe cabling system. Communications utility, a new definition added to help distinguish between the communication utility and the communication service provider. So, of course, the utilities, we always get into this fight because we don't have any jurisdiction over the utilities. Just like the Public Service Commission has all the say over public utilities. So you get into the power companies and AT&T and places, things like that, that are a utility that provide, you know, communications into a building. They have exclusive control And it gets into this big contest between us and them on who's a public utility and who's not. Dormitory, the word unit was removed. The term guest room, guest suite, and dormitory. The definition hasn't changed. Non-related people up to 16. Examples of dormitories include college dormitories, military barracks, fraternity or sorority houses. The definition of an electric self-propelled vehicle, basically what we would call a golf cart, right? But there's more to it than that. But it is a vehicle or marine vessel other than EV, so it's other than a car, that is powered by an electric motor that gets power from a fuel cell, PV, rechargeable battery, or similar. These include golf carts, boats, farm equipment, and similar. EVSPE, which is the export power equipment. The equipment including the outlet on the vehicle that provides at least 30 volts AC or 60 volts DC for loads that are not part of the vehicle. That is the ESVPE. And the equipment for plug-in charging, including conductors and equipment that transfer energy between the premise wiring system and the vehicle. So there you have the charging equipment, or the ESEVSE. It only applies to Chapter 624 or Article 624. That's the other thing about the code book. It's a little harder to go between these presentations in teams. I can't go and just have to. I wanted to show you that in the definitions. I'll try to show you at the end, though. Don't let me forget. Interconnection equipment, a new definition. Equipment that provides control and protection and allows power sources to operate in parallel with other sources or separate from them and allows them to be reconnected. So the paralleling switchgear microgrid interconnection devices, the MIDS, and some transfer switches are examples. Generator terminals, connection point for the output conductors leaving the generator. The definition was deleted because in 2023, they actually put it in 11029, so they took it out of the definitions. So it's been a code section, not just a definition, since 2023. And in 11039, it's for high voltage. And the definition, or what is in 11029, says it has to be within sight of and not more than a travel path of 50 feet to be considered within sight of. The definition for informational technology equipment in the circuits, equipment up to 1 kV, typically found in offices in similar locations for processing data, voice, video, and similar signals. Limited energy systems, we talked about that earlier. Complete system, including the cables, is either restricted in its power output that limits or shuts down the power source to mitigate the hazards of fire and electric shock, including Class 2, Class 3, and Class 4 circuits, communication systems, and power limiting fire alarm. Then the definition of microgrid, which we talked about earlier, was simplified. Power system of interconnected power sources that can act as a primary source independent of any electrical utility. Overcurrent protection was added to the definitions, the automatic interruption of any type of overcurrent. OCPD was also put in there. Branch circuit overcurrent protective devices, we have all kinds of names for them. 240.7 for the types of OCPDs used for circuits up to 1,000 volts, 1,500 volts DC. The definition of a pool, they added the word recreation. Equipment designed to contain water for swimming, recreation, wading, immersion, or therapeutic use. A leisure river is a pool. It's an informational note. 680 does only applies to Article 680.
Jim?
Yes, yes, sir.
But I'm sorry, before you get too far down the road, I raised my hand, but I'm not sure anybody noticed. Supplemental overcurrent protective devices. How are they handled in the code now?
It's still in 240.10, I believe.
Okay.
But they are not. When you say supplemental, and there's a lot of misinterpretation of that. And I know this for a fact because I got burned at the stadium by the engineer on this. Okay. Okay, so it is not the overcurrent that actually protects the circuit itself. It only protects that single individual thing is the way it's written, I believe.
Okay.
In other words,
what happens is my company produces a lot of panel boards, or not panel board, I'm sorry. We produce a lot of control panels, and not necessarily industrial control, but PLC type control panels. And I constantly have to point out to the guys, because they will try to use the, and I forget what the UL 489 is for the OCPD, and then there's a different listing for the supplemental. Then they try to use a supplemental in place of a 489 device, and that's why I was asking. It's still in the code somewhere. I just have to go find it. So
yeah,
sorry to interrupt. I just want to make sure it's still there.
No, it's a good question, because what happened at the Falcon Stadium was they had these company switches. You know what a company switch is? You know, it's typically like for stage power. It has a bunch of, what do we call them?
Twist locks or something?
Yeah, well, it has those cam lock connections on them, right? Like you see on a generator. And so they're more for stage power than anything else. Well, when the Falcons run out or some team runs out of that tunnel, there's a couple of company switches on each side that they put, all that stuff that they have out there for the smoke and all that other stuff. And so they had these company switches up there, and they put them up on top of this ledge, and the overcurrent in the company switch was like 7.5 feet or 8 feet in the air. I said, that's an overcurrent device. Oh, that's supplemental. I said, it's not supplemental. Okay, it's not there to protect that piece of equipment. Well, there's a breaker in the main distribution panel ahead of it. That protects the conductors. This protects this piece of equipment. That is not supplemental overcurrent. Okay, it protects, it's not designed to protect the busing in there of each individual circuit. It's part of, it should have been down, and they fought me. And after a while, you just beat your head against the wall for so long. But those company switches, I'm sure, are still right there, and they're probably still 8 feet in the air. But anyway, so yeah, supplemental does not protect the entire circuit. It just protects that piece of equipment. But in that case, it really was being used as a main for a distribution panel board. So I don't think it was supplemental to this day. Transformer secondary conductor is also a definition. A conductor that begins at the secondary windings of a transformer, not including service conductors. And then that would be the end of the definitions. Now, like I said, I put maybe 20 in there. There's probably 800, or there's probably 200 that changed. Article 110, anybody have anything about definitions? I'm trying to make sure we touch base on everything. And I'm just going to skip over some of this stuff, and we're going to take the last half an hour and just sort of whatever we get up to and just kind of go as far as we can go. But Article 110 covers the general requirements for installing all of this stuff, okay? As far as the scope, see, no more Annex J, it was removed. 110.3 is one that we use a lot for listing and labeling. It's 110.3B to make sure that things are listed and labeled. Informational note regarding the cybersecurity was added. Cybersecurity is becoming a big deal. Why is cybersecurity becoming a big deal? Because we have breakers now that can be controlled by a computer somewhere else. If somebody hacks into my system And we have a breaker that's set at, because it's an adjustable trip that's set at 2,000 amps, and somebody goes in there and jacks it up to 4,000, and all of a sudden it starts overloading without tripping, and we blow up some building. There's that possibility. So cybersecurity has become a big deal because there's so much advancement on the way breakers are controlled. 110.3 is the examination of the equipment. We want to make sure that equipment installed can be used in that environment or in the environment that they're being asked to be installed in. This is what I was talking about as far as the adjustable trips. I mean, the switchgear now comes looking like a big computer. So it's a big deal, cybersecurity. The NEMA guideline, CY 70,001, the implementation of guidance for connected electrical infrastructure. For more information, so NEMA has a paper out on it. Equipment that is listed and labeled must be installed and used in accordance with any of the listing or manufacturer's instructions. That's 110.3B. That's what we fall back on as inspectors a lot. It's interesting that it says water damage. Risk of electrical shock, keep the door closed to prevent water damage. Must be installed at least 5 feet from the water's edge. And then, of course, the installation and use gives you the information here on the installation guide, which is probably inside the transformer, which nobody looks at. You know, to remove these are only for shipping purposes and blah, 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 for the vibrations. Again, all this stuff is in the manufacturer's instructions that people, the apprentice or the helper just kind of tosses away when he opens the bag or whatever. Now we have the QR codes on there, which is a good thing. That helps my inspectors a lot. Available fault current, short circuit current ratings, and other characteristics. A bunch of revisions was made, remove some unnecessary words. The available fault current must be used to determine the required short circuit current rating of the equipment, the ratings of the overcurrents, and other circuit characteristics, which has to be done by a licensed engineer for the, when you have a, tough to get old and try to remember all this stuff. But when you do a, help me, it'll come to me. But when you do that calculation to find out how everything's supposed to work and what is required where for the short circuit current ratings, and how you come up with that, has to be done by
coordination study,
coordination study. Thank you so much for helping me. I worked all day too. So, yes, coordination study. So, available fault current is always posted inside the equipment, what it can withstand, what should be there. You know, we did some lashing like this. You don't see much lashing anymore, but a lot of times inside the equipment, it will tell you to lash this stuff a certain way. And you got to be an old-timey electrician to know how to lash. But there was out in Portland, there was a certain CT cabinet that the guy got, and it said that he had to lash the conductors, and the power company said, we absolutely do not want this stuff lashed in there. I said, well, as a chief, I said, well, I'm sorry, but the manufacturer says we need to lash it. So we're gonna make them lash it. What you do once you close the door and put your padlock on there, that's up to the power company. But to pass the inspection, they need to lash it. They took out the mechanical execution of work. 110.12c was deleted. Exposed cables and conductors on ceilings and walls must be supported in a way that prevents them from damage by normal building use. was never needed as the matter is covered in Article 300. And for limited energy, it's covered in 720. So one thing got removed. 110.17 for servicing, maintenance is no longer discussed in this section, nor is NFPA 70B. So servicing, no maintenance. Maintenance falls under 70B, not under the NEC. Servicing of equipment must be performed by qualified persons only and be performed in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions and listings. So you must have, if you're going to do something to the equipment, you need to provide to us what is required by the manufacturer to bring it back to its original listing. Servicing also a replacement trip unit provided by the original equipment manufacturer and approved by the AHJ. All this stuff falls under servicing. That's an old piece of equipment right there. Brown, Boveri and Company Limited. Reconditioned equipment. The controller and the transfer switch are not allowed to be reconditioned. The motor can be, and it doesn't have to be listed either. Motors never have to be listed because really all they're doing is changing the windings. Reconditioned equipment also must be provided with replacement parts by the original manufacturer, verified through the appropriate standards or designed by an engineer with experience in designing replacement parts. The definition of equipment in Article 100 to see what it is. That looks really good right there, don't it? And then spaces about equipment, working space and access to and egress from are required. Open equipment doors must not obstruct the egress out. If the doors open and obstruct, it is a violation. We had this happen in Portland also. A big piece of switchgear, and it opened up to give you no space to get out of that workspace. You have to provide exit out of the workspace, not just out of the room. If you open those doors, you would limit the workspace. You would not have what you needed to get out of that workspace. Now, this is always the big argument too, for equipment likely to require examination, adjustment, servicing, or maintenance while energized working space. What doesn't require energization to troubleshoot? I mean, you can't hardly do anything unless it's energized. You don't even know how it works or see what's going on. So it always comes up like, hey, I'm never going to work on this while it's energized. Well, you're never going to figure out what's wrong with it unless you do. So, and then special permission is granted for smaller working spaces that are allowed for DC voltages. The only time clearance is required in front of a low voltage piece of equipment is a fire alarm panel. And then NFPA 70E, which is the safety, which gets mentioned in the informational notes. And of course, the clearances and whether the equipment is rated 1,000 volts AC or 1,500 volts DC or less in an area with exposed live parts. There's the what used to be the definition of within sight of.
In the chat, or who has a question?
I have a question here.
Yes, sir.
Regarding the width of the egress path, it has to be 3 or 4 feet with doors open. When we put equipment facing each other, does that mean that we have to keep that clearance with both doors open on both sides of the egress path?
Yes, and it's actually the egress out of the room only has to be 24 inches. Okay, the working space is 3, 4, or 5 feet based on the voltage, but the egress out of the workspace is 24 inches. So if both doors swing like this, then you must maintain 24 inches between the door swings.
Between
get
the
out of-
door springs. Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
no problem. Equipment rated 1 kV or 1.5 kV DC, but less than 2 AC DC requirements of 110/14 must be followed for medium voltage conductors. And then, like I said, they moved 220 to 120. That's why it's highlighted. I did talk to everyone yesterday about this. I know, and I'm gonna go through. There's something here I want you to be aware of, because if you're designing like apartment buildings, like multifamily, I mean, I don't know how everybody designs that stuff, but you know, usually if you're doing a service calculation to size of service for a multifamily building, you take the square footage of the units times however many units there are, A, B, and C type units, come up with a total square footage, and then you go from there and you do this, that, and the other. There's a new calculation for sizing those dwelling units, okay, because of the LEDs. And I was showing them this yesterday, that the service and feeder load calculated at 2 volt amps per square foot for the lighting and receptacles, but 3 volt amps per square foot for used to determine the number of branch circuits required. So because of the LEDs and because of the, you know, the allowance of the 10 amp circuit breaker in the 2023 code, now also the fact that we have 14-2 copper clad aluminum conductors available in the 2026. It was not available in the 2023. They kept it out. A certain person kept it out. But Copper Weld actually came back and pushed really hard to have it put in. And so you can put 8 amps on that. Now it is only lighting and I believe individual branch circuit for a gas-fired fireplace. And I think you can use it for like bath fans. It doesn't have a lot of use other than lighting, but the color of 14-2 copper clad aluminum is the jacket of the NM cable is going to be like a blue color. And Copper Weld is about the only people making it. Now other manufacturers are looking into it, but Copper Weld holds the patent. So, and I was also telling your board yesterday that Lennar Homes, I was talking to the Copper Weld guys, Lennar Homes has signed a contract that so many of their subdivisions will be using only copper clad aluminum conductors. So it's becoming more and more relevant and prevalent in the field on how it's used, where it's used, and who's picking up on it. So, and a lot of it has to do not with the cost of the manufacturing, it's the theft. There's no, it says it right on the packaging that it is not recyclable. No one's going to steal something they can't get money for, okay? Unless they just want to do damage. But there are a lot of changes in Article 120, so just be mindful of it. There's a little calculation. So you would count, you know, the branch circuits like we always did, but not for a combination of the lighting and the power. I know they wanted me also to, and I'm going to escape out of here for a minute so I can jump ahead so I don't make you dizzy. Also, in
you have a question you want to go ahead and ask?
Go ahead. There was some changes in EV. Does somebody have a question? No?
I can see a hand raised, but I guess you put it down.
Okay. 625 had some changes. Electric vehicle supply equipment must now be installed by qualified persons only. Oh, Carlos?
Oh. Sorry, my mistake. Go ahead.
That's okay. It's okay. So now make sure that the qualified persons, now the definition for qualified persons is in Article 100. So it specifically says you must have knowledge of how the equipment works. Only qualified persons may install electric vehicle supply equipment that is permanently installed. We have a lot of electric buses here in Raleigh. We don't use electric, we use natural gas buses because we make our own natural gas. Down at the water treatment plant, we make natural gas out of all of that discarded waste material, and we sell natural gas to other people. So our buses all run on natural gas. Qualified persons, like I said, there is a definition in an informational note in NECA 413 for what a qualified person is. 625 also, new marking requirements for EVSE was added. So the following permanent markings must be provided on the outside of the EVSE in a location that is visible after installation. The supply voltage, frequency, number of phases, and current for the supply circuits, short circuit current rating of the EVSE as determined by one of the following: the rating of illicit assembly or another approved method. So what's the available fault current for the short circuit current rating? There's been a lot of problems with this stuff, this electric vehicle, because this would be the standard. The fact that you're finding all kinds of chargers that are not listed being put in because they're probably cheaper. Guy's got a TV in his garage. What's he complaining about? Does he sit in the car like a drive-in? Wait a minute. Hold on a second. Does he sit in the car and watch TV like he's at the drive-in? That's funny. The overcurrent protection requirements for EVSE was simplified. Basically, it's an 80 amp continuous load requires conductors and an overcurrent protection device to be sized at least 125% of the load. 80 amp continuous load requires a 100 amp overcurrent device and number 2 conductors. Number 3, AWG if the terminals are rated 75 degrees. Okay, so you have to have all that information in order to size the circuit correctly. The other thing that's been happening is if you have an adjustable setting, it may now be used for the branch circuit sizing. An exception for fleet software was added, self-adjusting equipment recognized, and information that was added. So a lot of this comes up at these conferences to say, okay, it says I can adjust it down to 48 amps or something like that, right? And I can put this at 125%. I can use the 40 amp breaker, 40 amp conductors, blah, blah, blah. The problem is on some of the Tesla apps, you can go into the app and you can actually adjust that on the app. And people were doing that and no one really knew it. And so they kind of made it where, hey, you had to size it for wherever the maximum was because there was the availability. But now they're saying that, you know, with certain software, you can size it, you know, to the adjustment circuit instead. And of course, if you have a DCS, electric vehicle management system, you know, there's ways to control it also. There's actually a breaker now that Eaton has that you can set. Jerry was telling me about it when I was in Daytona. You can actually have it where, so you don't have to change the service on your house. You can have it where you program that breaker that only the EV will charge and all these other loads will drop out at, say, you know, midnight to 8 a.m. in the morning. You know, that it only will let the vehicle charger go, so you don't have all this other stuff running. I mean, that's why the cybersecurity has gotten so, because the breakers are Wi-Fi connected and all this other stuff. And he had to get off the track a little bit, he had a breaker there that you could adjust for different frequencies. The problem with all of the air conditioners outside and the GFCI protection is the variable frequency drives have they operate at such high frequencies that that's what causes the GFIs to trip nuisance, so there's this nuisance stripping, which is why everybody has taken that requirement out. But Eaton now has a breaker that you can adjust to different frequencies, and it takes longer and longer to trip. So he had a demonstration on the table there. It was quite amazing. So the breakers are getting smart like everything else. The breakers used to just be dumb. They were just they had a little thermal thing in there. When it got too hot, it opened the circuit and the breaker opened. It was a spring and that was it. Now there are all these different things that happen inside these circuit breakers. So it's just amazing how the technology is moving us down the road. Again, if you have a software network and you have a fleet of chargers, you can have limited EVSE fleets for 3 or more vehicles, and the adjustable current settings are allowed if access to the adjustment is restricted by complying with 130.7b, which is now energy management systems because it got moved to 130. The adjustment must be made when the equipment is installed and may only be changed by a qualified person unless the equipment is self-adjusting. And then it goes on and on about this. The disconnecting means is required in complying with this section. You have to have a disconnecting means for the EV chargers. If you have multiple EVSEs or WPTEs are supplied to a single disconnect means at multifamily dwellings, the equipment and disconnect must be marked to indicate which equipment is supplied by which disconnect. If located remotely, its location must be marked on the equipment. Now we have a lot of this stuff. You see these kind of chargers. Those are those like 200 kW, 300 kW charging stations when you have those big heavy cables like that. That'll charge you in like an hour instead of 10. Cord and plug connected equipment rated up to 60 amps and 150 volts to ground. The cord and plug connection satisfies the requirement for the disconnecting means. That's great, right? For other than 1 and 2 family dwellings, a clearly marked disconnect must be provided for all permanently installed EVSE and WPTE equipment. 62543D1, emergency shutoff devices. 1, be readily accessible within sight of between 20 and 100 feet of the equipment. So now you have to have an emergency shutoff. A lot of this all falls back on the thermal runaway. Right now, here in Raleigh, if they build a parking deck and they're going to put vehicle chargers, electric vehicle chargers in that parking deck, the building official will make them put a 4-hour rated firewall if it goes up against another building, because there's no way for the firemen to control these thermal runaway fires. And actually, there's a big push to keep them below a certain level in the parking deck, because the trucks can't get up there to fight them. So either on the first couple levels, which gets into a big deal when you have someone buying a penthouse apartment for, $5 million, just a shell, and you tell them they have to park their cars, on the very first level, it becomes a real political issue. So there's a big fight going on. So I bet money you're going to see a lot of this stuff get waived from a lot of jurisdictions as well. So there's some disconnecting issues, emergency shutoff issues for the electric vehicles. The other problem that's been happening is this. These 50 amp receptacles have never been designed to be, or to have something plugged into them under continuous use for like 10 or 12 hours. And so all these plugs have been melting out of the walls, and the boxes themselves have been melting and starting fires. So now 625 requires that all EVSE and WPTE attachment plugs be rated not less than 125% of the rating of the equipment. A 50 amp receptacle is not allowed on a 40 amp circuit. Well, I don't know if it's a receptacle that's rated higher than 50 amps. I don't think there's a 60 amp. It doesn't apply to 2-pole, 3-wire, single-phase, non-locking receptacles rated 125 volts, 250 volts, 15 or 20 amp, or 30 amp or 50 amp listed EVSE WPTE use. So they make a receptacle now that has this little design on it. It's specifically designed to withstand the constant, continuous loads of the EV charging. Because it has become a big problem. And then also portable equipment. Number 5 was added, a 3-pole, 4-wire, 3-phase locking type pin and sleeve receptacle rated 277, 480 volts and 60 amps or 100 volts. Hand fastened equipment. There was a definition put in for hand fastened equipment and what it means. If you go back and look into definitions, securely fastened means it can stay on the wall, and I don't think you can just lift it off and take it with you. Hand fastened means you hang it on the wall while it's charging, and you can just pick it up and remove it, put it in the trunk or the hatchback, and take it with you. And then there was some things about swimming. Anybody have any questions about EVs? There's a lot of changes in EVs. I don't think that's all of them. There's more. Swimming pools always gets everybody in, everyone always sweats bullets over swimming pools. There was a definition change, you saw that. There's that issue about the corrosive environments and what wiring methods can be used in the corrosive environments. So they added liquid, flexible, metallic conduit in there. So it used to be just liquid, flexible, non-metallic, but now it's metallic as well. So basically Carflex and Seal Tight, which are trade names that we're more familiar with. Pool rooms are notorious for being just bad. Every year here in Raleigh, around beginning of May, we get hammered with every swimming pool there is here, with every apartment building and everything that we have to go out. They're usually changing pumps and doing work, and we walk in these rooms and the stuff is just atrocious and falling off the walls. It's been in there for 15 or 20 years and it's just nothing but a rust bucket. And we have a tough time getting people to fix it because it's an existing condition. The only thing we can do is write a notice to the owner of violation, and it usually looks like this. And I'm not kidding. I mean, it's bad. And a lot of times they just turn a blind eye to it. As long as the outside has a couple of, palm trees around it and some chairs and stuff, no one looks in those rooms, but those rooms are bad. That chlorine just eats through this stuff. Motors, same way. We want to make sure the motor is listed for pool equipment.
I've a question. So going back to the
Yes.
panels, does that mean you said no aluminum? Can you go back one more slide? Where it says aluminum wiring method. So does that mean the feeder going to the panel has to be copper?
No, the wiring method itself is the raceway. You couldn't use, because you needed an insulated equipment ground for pool equipment anyway, so you're not going to really find any kind of NM cable or SE cable, that unless you're going to use copper, but typically it's going to be the wiring method itself. When they say that, I think they're talking about, I would have to go back and dig to see if they mean wiring methods like the conductors themselves, or if they just mean the raceways themselves. Aluminum wiring methods are not allowed because they're talking about all raceways in that section. So I'd have to go back and dig. I think you could use aluminum conductors to the panel, but not the equipment ground. But I'd have to go look at it in 680 to actually dig in. And I'll be happy to do that. And I'll get back to Andrew or somebody. If the pool motor is supplied by an adjustable speed drive, the GFCI or SP GFCI must not be installed between the drive and the variable speed motor. So you want to make sure that, because it'll be a nuisance trip if you do that because of the frequencies. If a motor is replaced, repaired, or conditioned, then the GFCI protection must be installed with the new motor, which we always enforced anyway. They added the word reconditioned in there. Lighting, festoon lighting, we see a lot more of this decorative lighting that's hanging all over the place, so they added the word festoon in there. Portable signs are not allowed within 5 feet. The equal potential bonding grid around the pool. The bonding requirements section is to reduce the voltage differences in and near the pool. You're not bonding, you're not grounding the pool, you're bonding all the metal parts together. 68026A, the informational note for the ANSI C2 National Electric Safety Code, which is what the power companies use, National Electric Safety Code. Regarding to voltage gradients on the line side of the service point, some cause of voltage gradients are not within the scope of the NEC. We have had a lot of problems where you have voltage leakage through the ground from the utility, and it causes problems on the pool. You know, specific parts are required to be bonded. Any metal part within 5 feet of the pool. We bond the cages, we bond the perimeter surfaces in a certain way. There was a change on the perimeter surface. RMC, that's corrosion resistant, or brass, can be used in the 5 feet of the pool now. It never used to be allowed. Conductive swimming pools like this, that is considered bonded. It's touching the ground. Vinyl liners and fiberglass pools are not conductive swimming pool surfaces. This is, if the rebar is encapsulated, then we have to have a conductive grid under the pool, which is this. And the guy who makes this stuff is here in Raleigh. So I don't know. I know they're not using copper clad aluminum. They might start because it might be cheaper for them to manufacture it. If they'll allow it, they probably have to go up in size. But they make that stuff on a roll. It rolls out. It's pretty expensive. And they changed this for including pavers, concrete, and other paving. That's considered the paved surfaces. The unpaved surfaces are the grass. Sometimes you have a pool that goes right up to the grass. So a lot of changes in pools as well. Always. These are the cups that we talk about for the ladders and the stair handles and all that other stuff that's there. 4 points around the pool in the corners usually. If it's a rebar pool, you know, permanently, not a vinyl or fiberglass pool. That's the copper grid, 8x8, 12x12 grid. If they have the rebar around here, you see this is, if you go down to Florida, you'll make you do this like every 8 feet, bond this stuff in Hillsborough County around Tampa. Anyway, a lot of changes here, a lot of changes in pools, a lot of changes in, and I'm gonna end this because it's like 2 minutes to, a lot of changes in here. There was a lot of changes in healthcare too. Healthcare facilities had a lot of changes in it. I put them slides in there as well, as far as the essential power system and some of the grounding and bonding in patient care areas, which is also, you know, what we call hospital grade MC cable, what we also say is a redundant ground, to make sure that it's used with metal boxes, metal enclosures, multi-wire branch circuits and the use of them. Not allowed on life safety and power circuit equipments in patient care areas. The ground fault protection for the disconnecting means is allowed but not required between on-site power sources and transfer switches. for the essential power systems. Some other change, a lot of changes in the essential power systems. There was a change in assembly occupancies too about using AC cable, ACMC, and all has to have an insulated equipment ground now, which AC cable does not have. So you must have an insulated equipment ground in an assembly occupancy. So that brings us to 6:59. I appreciate y'all listening to me for 2 hours. I appreciate y'all coming. I hope that helped you at least get a little introduction. There's so much more. Again, we're probably going to do a few classes on the 2026 code at that website that I put in the opening slide. So if you feel free to join, I know Tracy over at AECA is the education chair. She doesn't care if you come. She doesn't care if you're members. Her goal is to get as many people in the room that mingle with each other in this industry as possible. So it's inspectors, it's contractors, it's engineers that come to that. So if you want to come, feel free to come. If you want to get added to the email list that I send out an email blast, a week before, 2 weeks before the classes are coming up, the links will be there with the Zoom stuff on them and all that other stuff. You just register at that website and you can come to the classes. That's up to you. So I'll turn it back over to your board folks. Thank you again for listening to me. If you have any questions or you need something answered, just reach out to them or ask them how to get in touch with me, and I'll be happy to do what I can. But I appreciate your time.
Very enjoyable, Jim. Thank you.
Thank you for having me again.
Yes, thank you, Jim. It was very insightful. I'm glad you were able to do another round of changes.
Thank you so much. I noticed you have a session on February 9th or something, and I'm going to join.
That's fine. Yes, it's February 9th.
Are there any other questions in the chat or on the floor? All right, as a reminder, we do have a happy hour tonight to mingle with your fellow IEEE members and board members. Drinks and dinner will be provided. And thank you again, and hope you all have a good night.
Before everyone logs off, also, same thing we've been doing, please email Alex Brumfield if you would like a certification for this presentation. Hopefully the pain of trying to renew your license at the last minute is still in your mind. This one is worth 2 hours, so be sure to send that email.
Thank you again, and we appreciate you, Jim.
No problem, man. Like I said, if anything I can do ever to help, just let me know.
All right.
Thank you, Jim.
Just to do this in 3 years for us.
Everyone have a good night. Enjoy your happy hour. There's no happy hour at Jim's house. Thank you all.
There's also a sign-in sheet behind Jason. Make sure you check if you want to engage. Something here without registering.
If you hang around for the happy hour, it's actually in, I forgot the suite number, but
I can take you all over there.
perfect.
Yeah. Yep.